Okay, so until now we have discussed about well-being, and there's one specific thing that is called subjective well-being. Okay, and so it basically like almost the same thing, but it just that like it's discussing from the individual perspective. One thing. Secondly, it is just trying to understand the perception, what individual perceive about their well-being. So this subjective well-being specifically talking about that aspect of it, and then it could be in any domain. So it could be about profession, it could be about their personal life, it could be about like what they perceive about their health, or about any other domain. Okay, so ultimately subjective understanding of their well-being is basically discussed in this particular aspect, right? And then it could be of any form. So it can be just about the economical aspect. So economic aspect might try to understand like if individual is earning something, whether people are happy with that, because like your earning will never be sufficient if you perceive it that way, and then it will be sufficient if you perceive accordingly. So ultimately like what are your perception, really it depend on that, whether like whatever you are earning that is sufficient for you or not. So ultimately uh, there is no absolute measurement for understanding whether individual is wealthy or not. It's a subjective understanding. Okay, that is one thing. The second is about the sociological aspect. So whether you are feeling uh, secure, safe in the with the people around you. Uh, it also depend on the sociological aspect, like what you consider as a standard of living, or what you consider as a success. So all those things like are coming from the society, and based on that you uh, against those milestones you compare yourself, against those benchmarks you try to understand your well-being. So that is one more aspect. And then another aspect would be about the psychological aspect, and that is like very much a personal aspect. So as we had discussed earlier, it is talking about the um, how you feel as an individual, whether you are feeling psychologically healthy or not, what kind of emotional ups and downs you are having, what kind of emotional state you are in. So all those factors basically affect on your well-being. So it's again one of the key indicator of your psychological well-being. Okay, now with these aspects it becomes essential to understand what could be the uh, how to understand and interpret the subjective well-being. So how we will understand that, and then for that purpose like there are so many theorists who are like written about it, and then Maslow is one. So Avni had like shared one thing, like a very interesting piece earlier, and I consider that's like a very good empirical way to look towards Maslow's thoughts and his entire work. That is one thing. So I request Avni to share like what she's exactly doing, and then what is her understanding about Maslow. Avni,
Um,
do you want to share?
as far as I have understood, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
as far as I have seen Maslow, um, he has tried to be pretty much close to the yogic philosophy that we have sort of tried to understand, and
Mm-hmm.
where the ultimate goal is the self-actualization. So, and
Mm-hmm.
plus, it starts from the physiological needs, which are the basic needs, which are important for survival. And then
Mm-hmm.
gradually it goes towards how we sort of belong to community and our interactions and the group dynamics that we would be going through, and the self image and the self concept that we see when we stand in front of a society or the community we belong. So
Mm-hmm.
all of this comes together, how growth and how a person's life journey is going to be determined is taken under observation. And that is
Mm-hmm.
how we have tried to sort of layer it up. And as long as I have understood from my previous course, uh, it is said, I mean, it is understood that unless and until the person is beyond one level. For example, a person is beyond safety and security. The person cannot sort of cherish or live the love and belonging. So if a person has issues with physiological needs, if a person is not able to have food or shelter or clothing or any other physiological needs satisfied, anything with respect to above safety and security is not going to be experienced by that person. It is always it is a journey from the red zone to the lavender zone.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Yes. Interesting. Good. So I do have like a few points to raise about this particular aspect, and then obviously those all critics are not mine. There are like a number of other guys who have like worked on Maslow's theory, and then they do have certain critics on that. So we'll just try to quickly discuss that. But before going ahead, like if Sadaf has already worked or like learned about this particular theory, then if she has something to share with us.
Uh, Mostly, again, like an understanding of how our needs are placed in order for the need for love and belonging to come. You have
Mm-hmm.
to have certain other needs that have to be sort of fulfilled. Only then can you move on. So this is just
Mm-hmm.
like a broad pyramid which helps us understand what are the steps and where
Mm-hmm.
each need lies, and
Mm-hmm.
the sort of psychological need that it fulfills at the same time. So that's how, like,
Mm-hmm.
that's mostly my understanding of Maslow's hierarchy.
Yes, yes, yes. Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what like Maslow has to say. That like he's saying that people are in the journey. They're like moving towards self-actualization, but obviously they need to fulfill. They need to meet the other needs as well. And he has like very nicely. So this particular framework gives us a lens to look towards various needs. We can categorize our needs using this particular thing, and then it can become one particular, I would say, a frame to understand the well-being, to understand whether people are how they are perceiving about themselves. Okay, but there are certain critics as well, and then one of the most important critics, like people don't see that this kind of segregation is really possible. People say that it does not necessarily mean that like if we reach to a certain level, that the other needs are not required. Okay, so let's say if I'm looking for self-esteem, that does not mean I don't need physiological needs. Okay, so this is just an example, but ultimately people say that all individuals work on all these aspects or various aspects together. Okay, so I might be looking for self-actualization based on whatever understanding I do have about my self-actualization, whatever I might be immature. Like when I was 16, I guess according to Maslow, I might not have matured enough, but like I had some understanding like where I want to go, where I want to reach, and then accordingly I was shaping my life. I was making my life choices, right? So ultimately at that time as well, I was working on self-actualization, and at that time I was not at all working on my physiological needs. Those were like completely taken care by somebody else. That was like my sponsor, my parents. They were looking after it, and they were worried about it. I was never worried about my physiological need at that time, right? So if you see that particular scenario, then I was like concerned more about self-actualization and was not at all concerned about the physiological needs, right? So basically, even though you see this kind of hierarchy, people say that this kind of hierarchy does not exist. All these things are important. They may coexist. They may coexist at the same time. And if you see that like this continuum, then that continuum also does not exist. People jump over something. People from physiological need may directly jump to love or belonging. They might not be interested in looking for safety and security. Okay, that is another critique people are making. The one more critic is like these definitions of all those things also change according to the culture, according to the background and the context you are coming from. Okay, if there is one state where it's very the situation is very hostile over there, people like it's very common to kill somebody. Okay, And then if you are living in that kind of environment, then your definition of safety and security might be very different than an individual who is like living in a very secured environment. So just small change in that security environment may make you feel uneasy, whereas in the other context where it's the common practice, then I guess they will wait for something big to happen. So ultimately, even though these things are listed over there, it is not an objective representation. Every individual might be perceiving it very differently. So that is another aspect people are talking about. Yeah, I guess like these many critics are there. But do you agree
Yeah,
with that?
I agree with that. These aren't very defined in the sense that these are separate categories and they overlap. But I just want to clarify whether is this only regarding an individual, like you said that you didn't have to work towards meeting your psychological needs, your physiological needs, but your parents were. So in that sense, your physiological needs were still met with. Only then were you able to work on self-actualization.
Yes.
So is it only in terms of an individual being able to fulfill these, or is this certain levels being fulfilled for you to be able to focus on aspects which are higher up?
Yeah, so I guess I'm not sure like if I understood you. Can you please come again?
So no, I was just trying to understand, like the way I understand the hierarchy also is that certain needs have to be met with. It doesn't matter if I am working towards achieving that or somebody else is providing it for me. If that basic need is met, then I can focus on something which is higher up.
Yes.
That's correct, right?
That's exactly how it is. Yeah. So those needs need to be made. If you're like getting it from somebody else, or your parents are doing it, or earlier, if you remember, then all the individuals like who are working in the performing arts, like singing and dancing and all this, they were looking for patronage from certain kingdoms. Then in that case, they were basically looking for somebody to take care of their needs. So it was like physiological need, their safety, security, and all those needs. So ultimately, in that case also, their initial needs getting met, and then because of that, they could focus more on self-actualization or self-esteem might be.
Yeah. Okay.
So ultimately, it's important that like it's getting met by somebody else or by individuals.
But yeah, I agree. These aren't very hard fast like categories, and there are overlaps, and you can like move between them as well.
Yeah, Amni?
The kind of psychological understanding that I have had from studying the Maslow's, there is. Okay, am I audible now?
Yes. There's some delay, but you are audible now.
So the psychological understanding that I've had from studying Maslow's is that. Okay. So there is this gradual stepping up process when it comes to the independence of an individual. So for an individual to be able to attain the physiological needs and then feel safety and security is a completely higher level of higher, or rather a much more grounded level of safety and security that the person is going to feel when others are trying to provide for the physiological needs. So the independence factor as an individual matters a lot when the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is being discussed for an individual. So when it comes to a person who is being provided by others for the physiological needs, it is more with respect to the person's strength is being borrowed from somebody else to be able to operate and to be able to satisfy the physiological needs. So when that is happening, the safety and security still has a bit of deficiency, because the person knows that the physiological needs is something that I am not able to maintain, and it's completely on the inside level. It is nothing to be proved on the outside, whether the person has a home or whether the person has bread and butter on the plate. If the person knows that this bread and butter is something that I have earned, and the house that I am living in is something that I have earned or bought by myself, there's a completely different level of safety and security that the person is going to feel, and that is how the ascend of the stages happen. Even in
Right.
relationships, the safety and security is the core zone. When a person feels safe and secure, only then the person is able to cherish the love and belonging in any relationship. So gradually, it is one after the other that I have, as far as I have observed and I have understood with respect to math laws.
Right. So I guess like there are two aspects you are trying to highlight. One is about the uh, what people perceive or what they are feeling about it, in the sense about the physiological needs, as you mentioned, that like if somebody else is providing it to us, then in that case, like if uh, if you are thinking that like those things you are not earning by yourself, and then you do have dependency on somebody else, then that might not be giving you enough strength to go ahead and then work on the other needs. So that is one aspect you are trying to highlight, and then I actually agree with that. It's completely on our understanding and what we feel as an individual. So for me, as I mentioned, that like when I was at when I was in college, at that time my parents were taking care of my all physiological needs. But like after a few years, I realized like this is something which I need to take care by myself. And then at that time, like when I was taking it from my parent, the way I was doing it for last 15, 16, 17 years, suddenly I started feeling that like it's not good. And then suddenly I started feeling that like my physiological needs are not getting met. And then I started like working part time. I started doing something to earn my own basic needs. So just to uh, pay for my food, just to pay the rent in the hostels I was staying. So for those basic things, I started earning by myself. And then I guess that's exactly what Avani is trying to say, that like what is your mental state? It's completely based on that. It's completely interpreted from that perspective. So what external world interpret for more than that, like what you feel as an individual, that is more important. So I do agree with that particular point. But second point, I guess like she was just trying to mention that uh, she can figure out there is it's some hierarchy. So you need to have uh, you need to be at certain level on each stage, and then you can think about the stage which is like coming after that. In the sense she mentioned about safety, security, and then you can feel comfortable to be in love and belonging. I guess like at least for me, based on my personal experiences, I could say that like this hierarchy was not something like I ever followed, and I don't think that I'm even following it today. So let's say I'm doing my PhD now, and that is like I'm just trying to move towards self-actualization, and that is the only reason I'm doing it. I'm investing my time and everything over there, but for that I'm compromising a lot on safety and security. On the specifically on the financial security, I'm compromising a lot. Sometimes I might be compromising for my physiological needs as well. Okay, but I'm still happy working on my self-actualization. So other needs are important, I know that. Okay, but that does not determine whether you will work on the other level or not, whether you will work on self-actualization, or you will fall in love, or you will feel belong somewhere. So all those things might be happening parallelly. That is one thing. And second thing, you can cross over certain stages. That is what I feel based on my personal experience. I might be wrong as well. Yes. Any last comment, or shall we
Yeah,
move ahead?
so what I'm trying to say is pursuing them is not the um, Yeah, so pursuing these stages is definitely in our hands. It doesn't it doesn't stop us from not pursuing them. It is about how with how much substance we will be able to cherish those stages. So that is what I meant when I so everybody is pursuing self actualization, but wherever we are getting caught with respect to pursuing self actualization, it is somewhere in the lower levels that we are deficient with. We may be deficient with basic security, we may be deficient with self esteem, or we may be deficient with love and belonging. All the stages, they may be in parallel. We may be living them parallelly, but the gravity with which each and every level that we are living will definitely be only possible if the previous level is completely uh, has a higher substance than the ones that we are.
Yeah. So I do agree up to some extent. So what I feel is that every individual have different characteristic, right? They have different attitude, different aptitude, and then they just have different understanding of the world. And then obviously the past experiences as well. And based on that, it depends like what you value more. So there might be an individual who will like valuing self-esteem more. They want to earn respect from others, and for that purpose, they will do n number of things. Okay, and there might be people like who value love more, and then for that purpose, they will be ready to compromise n number of things. So ultimately, what things you will emphasize more, or where you will invest your time and then energy and other resources more, that will really depend on what we value. And what we value will be dependent on our past experiences, the culture we are coming from, the kind of people we are living in, the kind of context we are in. So all those things will determine what we value more, and then accordingly we will invest our time, energy, and other resources into it.
Even when I think of the hierarchy, I feel at least when it comes to physiological needs, I sort of do broadly agree with the way it's structured in the sense that, again, I might be thinking in the absolute abject sense as well, where I'm saying you need to have at least basic food, clothing, housing to be able to pursue anything above it. I mean, if these basic needs are not met, then I don't think you can like think about other things. But again, if you're talking about the degree to which, like what kind of living, what kind of clothing, then it's again it differs. So I'm looking at it in the sense of absolute basic necessities.
Now it remind me Amartya Sen. So when we discuss about capabilities, this point is like being discussed in specific, where we say that like if people choose to be hungry, then I guess those physiological needs doesn't exist at all. So there are yogis who go in Himalayas and stay over there without food for months. Then in that case, even if they are hungry, and even if it is a physiological need in that sense, people are actually not looking for it. So it ultimately depends on what individual is feeling about it, what individual's needs are, what they value more. So I guess like slowly the discussion is getting dragged towards what Amartya Sen has to say in capabilities approach. So all those things are important. This could be few of the indicators, but only it can be considered only when individual values it. They have reason to value it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I see the point you're making. Yeah, I mean, of course, as an individual, I need to think that having food is important. But if I voluntarily don't, then I can skip that and move to like a higher level. Like,
Yes.
of course.
Good. So it's the first time I could connect Maslow with Amartya Sen. Yes. So with this interesting thing, I guess why I thought to discuss this particular slide, because then it gives us some reference. It tells us like what different things can become part of our definition of well-being, what different things need to be taken into consideration. Now, if these are few points, then I guess like ultimately we come closer to listing what people feel worthwhile, what they want to pursue in their life. Okay, so that particular hierarchy can help us understand that. Okay, we can debate, we can just critique that particular thing, but at least it gives us certain listing. And we see that like people at different point in time in their life do value those points, right? So it may take us little closer to listing certain things, and it can be a very objective listing. Okay, we obviously it will change according to individual, but there will be listing which people will value at certain point in life. But having said that, I guess this kind of absolute measurement has some problem, which we discussed during our Amartya Sen's early discussion as well. So when we were discussing Capillides' approach, and then we were comparing it with Martha Nussbaum's approach. So the basic difference is that Amartya Sen don't believe in listing something, whereas Martha, she suggests that we can have a very higher level or universal things which can be listed, where we can start from. Okay, so I guess the same discussion is happening here again then. So based on Maslow, we can get certain listing. Okay, but that listing will surely have some problem, and which are listed over here. So what should be on the list? So there can be a number of things, and then Maslow might not be in position to cover everything. There could be a number of other things which people may value. So now let's say we get a list of 50 different things people may value, but how will you prioritize that list? Which things they will value more? So how will you compare that? What will be the reference against which you will measure it? So all those issues are there. Okay, and the last one might be like most important thing is like who decides what is more important. So government may think that education is important, and for that purpose we do have right to education, which is a basic right, and every child is expected to get educated, expected to get schooled. Okay, so let's don't call it educated, but at least to get schooled. But now it's really difficult to understand whether people really want it or not. Somebody might not be respecting it, somebody really don't want that. Okay, and then if you force on them, you are basically reducing their happiness, you are basically compromising their well-being. So just listing something is again a very risky proposal. Okay, which Amartya Sen also have to say, is also having the same logic for not listing Capillides. Okay, but if at all we want to do that, then we come across one more idea, and that is this. That is about the this. Sorry, yes. So this is like one more attempt to figure out like what can be the list of things which people do value, and against which we can measure their happiness, their well-being. Okay, so that attempt happened in Bhutan. Now it started long back in 1972 when Wangchung, the king of Bhutan, he just tried to prepare the list of things people may value, and then decided to compare individuals' well-being using that particular using those all variables. Okay, so right now, and then after that is like huge support from the community out there, and then Bhutan was really a very fertile ground to experiment a lot of things, being its geography, and then the kind of welcoming nature which Wangchung had. So because of that, I guess like people could enter in the territory, and then they could experiment a lot. People got a very small geography, a lab kind of thing to test a number of things, and because of that, I guess sometimes I consider that GNH and this entire happiness related work could happen in Bhutan. One thing, it's the other aspect, like it was little isolated in that sense. So it's in the hilly area, so there was like a very less influence from the external world in that sense. And then because of that, yeah, So and then because of that, I guess like people could experiment a lot, and then because of the same reason, I guess like Bhutan become the one one uh, I would say a benchmark for understanding happiness, and then from there we understand various aspects of happiness. So in this particular attempt, they divided it into multiple domains. In the sense, they decided happiness can be measured using certain variables, and then they compartmentalized those into, I guess, 9 various aspects. And then we basically GNH proposed to conduct a survey. So in the entire nation, and then collect that data, and based on that they try to understand the happiness index of every country. Okay, so that is the attempt which people did in Bhutan, and nowadays it's being followed in other countries as well. So one of my colleague and we together tried to do one study in Bhutan. Okay, but before explaining more about that particular study, let me just quickly summarize like what various variables and then various aspects GNH calculations do consider. So let me just quickly go through that. And the first one is about the economic wellness. So it try to understand like what kind of earning individual have, whether it is sufficient for them to uh, meet their needs today and to plan for their future things what they're aspiring for. Okay, so this for the first aspect, try to understand the understand it from the economic perspective, the economical aspects of it. They just try to understand that. Then the second is about the environmental wellness. So it is about the uh, from the sustainability perspective it is thinking, because in Bhutan it's very crucial, it's very important in one sense that like it's completely dependent on the geography around them. They are like very much care about their environment. So that then necessarily became a part of this entire listing. So that is one aspect. The other one is the physiological or the physical wellness, under which we consider health, and then might be other things like what people whether people feel energetic to work, and then a number of other things which directly connect with our physiology, connect with our body. So all those aspects were like considered in this particular indicator. Then come the mental wellness. That was like the completely the psychological aspect of it, where people try to understand how you feel. Are you feeling comfortable, or are you feeling safe? So it's more about the psychological aspects of it. And then the last one is workplace wellness. So like if you are in certain profession, or if you are a student and then you are going to school, in your work environment, how you're feeling, are you feeling comfortable over there, are you feeling accepted by people, are you getting challenging work to do, uh, are you overworked? So all these aspects they try to understand in this indicator. So these are like few of the indicators on which they calculate GNH, and then they try to understand it, to compare various countries based on this particular index. In any thoughts, like have you heard about GNH earlier?
Yeah. And India features usually quite low in it.
Sorry.
And I'm saying India features quite low on it.
Yeah,
Yes.
when I was,
Yes.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, sadly, yes. But it will always be the case, right? Uh, because what I feel is India is a huge country. India is a diverse country. It doesn't have a homogeneous group, and then in that case, it's difficult for you to get the similar results. So one particular state might be doing good on the uh, economic wellness related indicators, but at the same time they might not be doing good on the environmental wellness, because these two things might be contradictory to each other. Might be, I'm saying, because there are people who believe in sustainability business. So they might come with other arguments. But in general, I'm saying that like a few of the indicators might be contradictory to each other. And then when you test it in certain states, it, you may like might be higher in some indicators, but lower in the other one. So overall, if you calculate, then there's like hardly any possibility that you will measure, you will average it out, and then you will get, you will still land at the higher ranking. I don't see that it will be possible. Well, people say that like then America, Canada, and then Russia, all these countries are also having huge geographies. Those countries are also diverse, but still doing better than India at least.
Yeah.
Yes, I do have one another aspect to share, and now let me share like what study we did. So one of my colleagues, she went to Bhutan. Her name is Tarnu, and then she went over there to understand how they are introducing GNH through education. So they basically introduce certain curriculum, because as everybody know that education is one way to propagate, one way to transmit your policies. This is one way to if you want to make people aware of certain thing, if you want policies to be digested by the larger people, then you use education as one medium. Then obviously the same thing was implemented in Bhutan as well. Bhutan converted their entire curriculum from GNH perspective. Okay, obviously there was huge political will over there for this particular thing, and then they introduced one curriculum. Now based on that, they started influencing children at young age, and their agenda was to help them understand GNH and to respect it and to abide by all the indicators, to make sure that after a certain age they will perform high on all the indicators. So that was basically might be an agenda. Okay, but we as a researcher thought like we need to cross check that particular assumption or cross check that particular point. We need to understand whether children really do respect this GNH related business or not, because ultimately when you say that people do respect it, they are compromising a number of things. Let's say environment wellness related thing. Okay, when you say that you want to respect that, at the same time you might not be in position to entertain the industries, because that will be contrary to environmental wellness, that will affect adversely to that particular aspect. So obviously then you cannot encourage the industries. Sometimes you might not be in position to do international trades because you want to promote the local businesses. Okay, so there are n number of things which will affect contrary to the indicators they have mentioned over there. Now it has a detrimental effect, in the sense, if youth see television, and then based on the advertisement available over there, they may perceive that certain things are essential in their life. For example, perfume is something, it's not a necessary, it's not a necessity, but people do value that because the external markets are forcing it to us through the media, through the advertisement. And now when in Bhutan all those things are getting available, now people do have access to media, people do have access to internet. Because of that, a number of things might be getting forced on them. So if those things start getting forced on them, they will obviously purchase it. Now if they start purchasing these kind of things which might not be their life necessities, then they need more money. If they need more money, then for that purpose they will have to like figure out some solutions. They will have to figure out the ways through which they can run business, they can draw the foreign exchange, or they can generate something in their own country. Okay, so they will have to produce more, they will have to consume more, then only they will get more money, right? So ultimately then you start compromising on GNH. Okay, so ultimately, even if your curriculum is trying to help children understand importance of GNH and trying to communicate the value system, okay, but the market forces might be reaching them, and might be influencing them. So our research was to understand how much that particular educational curriculum is helping children understand the value system over there and to abide to it, to change their aspirations, or rather to hold their aspiration to what historically people were believing. Okay. Now, what we did is like almost, I guess, 7-8 years earlier, we went to Bhutan, and then over there, we run one survey over there in few schools, and then we tried to understand what youth value more. And our plan is that like after 10 years, we will go there again, and then we will try to understand whether children still value the same thing or not. If with increasing generation, if moving generation, their aspirations changes, then we can easily see that GNH won't exist for long, because people's aspirations are changing, and then according to changing aspirations, they will start devaluing GNH. They won't be valuing it equally. Okay, then ultimately, whatever we see that like whatever the way we perceive Bhutan as the milestone or happiness related thing, tomorrow we might not be in position to do that, because external forces are enforcing youth to think beyond whatever indicators already listed in happiness. Okay, now I just want to listen your thoughts. Will it happen? Will people be able to follow this thing, or they will change in the future? And then what will happen with happiness then?
Yeah, I don't see GNH as an absolute indicator also.
Agree.
I mean, it basically goes alongside the various other indexes that we have to measure, like development and growth and all of that. So
Yes.
this is like an additional, like a something that will complement those indexes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like you said, there's constant changes in terms of how we view what makes us happy also, and a lot of that is influenced by market forces. So that's definitely there.
Yes, yes. I do agree with that particular point that like it's just one index. There could be a number of other things, and this particular index might have missed a lot of indicators as well, and those this entire
Yeah,
yeah might not be sufficient then.
it's just one way to think about it. Like I wouldn't only rely on GNH as like an indicator for how country is doing. That's all.
Yes. I do agree completely. And then, if that is the case, then I guess one thing then I understand is that then happiness become very contextual thing. So we just need to understand happiness differently for every context, every country, every state. That need to be interpreted differently. That is one thing. And then second thing is like then if according to changing situation, if people start valuing something else, then that also need to be respected.
Yeah, I think this is mostly like an attempt to broadly classify what can be like classified into how you can see happiness. Like these are things whether you have good education, a good place to live in. I mean, these are the very obvious things.
Yes.
So we've been able to categorize it, but then there are a lot of very subjective things, like you said, which doesn't come into this index also.
Yes.
So I mean, it definitely, I don't say it as a wholesome thing, but like it can accompany other indexes.
Yes. Just only one concern I have over here is that if we depend like on the individuals to decide what they value, then the problem is like something which is not visible immediately might get respected little less, in the sense environmental changes, for example. So people don't consider that as a big problem because they don't see it affecting them immediately. They think that like it might be a distance fact. It might come across them. They really know that, but they don't say it happening immediately. And then because of that, cities are growing. Because of that, the kind of environment we have over here, uh, the kind of situation we are in, that just because of that. So let's take Delhi for example. So kind of air pollution we have over there, it is not something which people realize today. People know it for the fact that like in future these things gonna happen. And forget about Delhi. Now looking at Delhi, other cities should also understand like this kind of situation may exist. We may come across that kind of scenario. People are not ready to think about it. People are not
Yeah.
preparing. They are not planning for it.
Yeah, I
So-
agree with that completely.
Then because of
Like-
that, then
Hmm.
yeah, please.
No, please complete.
Yeah. So because of then it's what people value. That is also little risky in that sense, because sometimes people might not value which is like essential for them.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I don't think this comes at a very, it basically gives us an understanding of, again, what society values on an average,
Yes.
which might again be skewed with what you think is right or wrong. So it's again, this is not like a question of is what they value is good or bad. You know, you want to save the environment, but people don't care for it. So it just
Yes.
projects that. But it's not like a judgment on like whether it's good or not. It just sees on an individual level whether a person is happy in the society he's in.
Yes. Yes. There is one more concern. So let's say even if I value, but I don't know what to do. In the sense, like I do value, I understand that air pollution is not a good thing, and then I should restrict it. But I don't know the means to take care of it. In the sense, I don't have any affordable alternatives for that. Let's say I decide that I don't want to use private transport. I want to use public transport, and then it may reduce pollution. But I don't have option for that. People are not providing any option. So it's basically a responsibility of the government, the state, to provide public transport. But if it is not available in my area, even though I do value it, I won't be in position to do anything for that. That is one thing. The second point is that let's say if I value something, and then based on that I decide to do something, but what I'm doing, what are the practices I'm following, those might not be having a holistic thought in it. And then because of that, I end up doing something which is not good. So that I have observed as an educationist, I have always observed that people do value education. They do value that they need to contribute for children's education. They need to take care of it. They need to contribute for that. And then what they do, they just make them sit for study. They decide their timetable. They tell them like you need to sit here and then study for 2 hours. Do your homework. Okay.
Yeah.
Now their intentions are good, but they don't know ways to do that. So this is another problem, that like they lack with the expertise, they lack with the understanding. So even though you value it, does not necessarily mean that you have right ways to execute it.
Yeah, and there's no absolute way of measuring all this. Like you can't say there's one correct way of measuring it.
Yes.
So there's always an error in terms of how, even in terms of how I think people understand happiness might be so different of what brings them happiness and all of that. So it's
It's very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Because like it's all about like what frame will you choose to understand happiness. It's really depending on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely by no means a golden standard of measurement of how society is doing. Even though people might be happy, they might be ruining that entire society itself, you know. I mean, like you said, they've trashed the environment, all of that, but everybody is happy. So it doesn't really throw light on those aspects.
Yes.
Or how even when I think of healthcare and I think of the US system, everyone's happy not having public healthcare, you know. They're actually fighting against it, which goes against my logic. I'm like, why wouldn't you want universal healthcare, right? But people are happy. Like it's such an individualistic society and they believe in market forces that they don't want anything which is centralized and universal. So
Yes, that's true. And then basically we do have historical evidences that has proved that people do value wrong things, which like in the future or in the longer run, it turn up negatively. So
Yeah.
there are like
Yeah.
a number of things which just like people has seen earlier,
Yeah.
like yeah. So there was Sati Pratha in India, and then so I'm not
Yeah.
against any religion in that sense, but like I'm just mentioning it here because people used to value that a lot at certain point in time. But the same
Hmm.
people, like the people coming from same community, same religion, then started devaluing that. They started like feeling it's not really good, it's leading to wrong practices, and then people coming from same religion starting talking against it, and then slowly that practice was like removed from the religious practices completely.
Hmm.
So there are like a number of such things which people used to value at a certain point in time, but slowly when they progress they realized that it was not a good practice, and then they came out of it.
Yeah. That's
So
what. So even the way we think, it's actually so much defined and influenced by the times we live in, and that itself changes,
hmm,
right? The
hmm,
base
hmm.
very
Exactly.
definition is never constant.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And then it again gives me one reason to believe in Amartya Sen's capabilities approach. Then he says, like, if nothing is fixed, then why are
Hmm.
you listing the capabilities? Let's wait for that time to come, and then
Hmm.
go to that particular context, talk to those people, and based on that, you decide like what they value, and then plan for it.
Yeah, I think this
And
is
then,
mostly from in order to make it easy to communicate certain things, people,
hmm,
that you come
yes,
up with these indexes and you come up with these categories.
yeah,
Um, you just make it easier for a layman to understand okay, that this is where we are placed, or this is how society is broadly
hmm,
doing. People are happy, not happy, things to talk about.
yes,
Even
yeah,
like a government needs to be able to communicate to its people. So these are ways in which you
mhm,
do that, right? These are
yes, yes,
indicators. That's
right.
mostly how I
It's
see it.
right. So ultimately, we need certain objective indicators to communicate something.
Hmm. Yeah, I just
But
look
if
at
you
these as
get
communication tools. That's it. Like,
yes, and then the way uh, people discuss GDP, and then they sometimes think that it's not a good indicator of understanding my life, my progress. Then similar people can say
hmm.
that GNH is really not a good indicator to understand my progress, my life, my happiness.
Yeah. Yeah. True. True.
Yes, good. But that's perfectly like one thing is well taken, that like it's just one of the indicator to understand it. It might not be the holistic measurement of deciding anybody's happiness or any nation's happiness in that sense. But it can be a communication tool. It can just indicate something, and then people can just go back home, can sit back, can reflect, and can try to understand: are we like are these things really happening? And then
Hmm.
if they see that like things are really the way these indicators are saying, then they need to improve it. But if they say see that indicators are not reflecting their actual sense, then they should try to change the indicator. They need to improvise it. They need to influence those indicators. That is what
Hmm.
one particular nation can do.
Yeah. Like even when I was working with the smart cities mission, there was a lot of there were projects which were happening where they were building indicators for literally
Hmm.
everything, like how to measure city, how to measure this, how to measure that, and they just come up with
Mhm.
indicators,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
they need something that you can quantify, and it's easy to do that when you have like a set of indicators. Then you can
Hmm.
quantify how a specific area is performing. So
Yes.
I never
Mhm.
take all these indicators very seriously because I know even people who come up with them, it's sort of an ease of calculating. That's it.
Yes.
It
Yes.
it's not a real true reflection of that,
Yeah.
like how people are or their troubles or any of that. In fact,
Right, right, right. Exactly. And then when we were discussing the same topic in our other class, that was about capitalism approach. So during that, we
hmm.
discussed the critics of Amartya Sen's capitalism approach. And in that, like, one of the critique was about the information gap. So people are saying
Hmm.
that like you won't be in position to measure certain things. You won't be able to find the objective measurement for certain indicators, certain variables. Then in that
Hmm.
case, you take a comfortable position. You
Yeah.
yeah, you will align yourself with a position like which you can measure easily, which you can have the operational definitions for, and then you measure that.
Hmm.
And that basically lead to information gap.
Yeah.
And then if all the indicators are or all the indexes are based on this kind of approach, then obviously we don't have any reason to consider them that as the absolute measurement of something.
Yeah, that's why that's why you have multiple indicators and you look at it all together to give you a broad idea of, okay, how do you measure whether it's capital
Yes.
or this or that.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yes. Perfect.
I mean, we need to be able to visualize something, right, as people.
Yes. Yeah.
So how
Very-
it's just that.
Yes. Perfect. So with this, I guess we'll stop here. We in last two sessions we tried to discuss well-being and happiness, and now I guess it's time when we can actually start figuring out what empirical approaches or what practical approaches we can take to make sure that these things are assured. So about the progress, growth, development at the individual level, development at the larger scale, or well-being, happiness. So how we can just design programs and how we can participate as active citizens. So all those aspects we'll start discussing from our next session.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
Perfect. Yeah. So it was really interesting, and then I was happy to interact with you and then understand your perspectives as well about all those things. It was really enriching in that sense.
Same. I'm really happy. I mean, that I was able to be a part of this.